is how she always opens my mind to the possibility of how science and spirituality connect. And she really helps me to think about things that are outside of the box. And I hope that you have the same experience of her today. So I'd like to welcome Reverend Dr. Ruth Miller, who's going to be sharing a message, entrainment, not just electrons. Let's welcome Ruth.
So normally when we hear music like that, we start doing this, right? And then pretty soon everybody else will start doing this. Yeah? Have you ever been in a drumming circle and you're all going, and all of a sudden everybody else is going, right? That is entrainment. It comes from the French entraînement, and the word train comes from entraînement, entraînement, because it means push or pull together. Anyone ever been at a clock shop where all the clocks are going at the same pendulum rate, right? Or tuning forks, right? You click one and then the other ones start vibrating. It turns out this is a fundamental physical principle that is essential in our universe and an essential part of being biological systems within this universe. The slow, steady, consistent beat, rhythm, becomes everybody's normal state of being. There are many, many YouTubes out there emerging in the last 6, 8, 10 months on this subject. And the reason that I bring it here today is because I get a lot of questions on how in blank blank did we get where we are today? What are these people thinking? And I get it from both sides. And it's entrainment. This is what has happened. The message has been delivered so consistently that people are moving in rhythm with it. They can't think anything else because that's all there is this movement. Now, music is a huge part of that. And one of the things I did while I was researching this talk is I went online to find out which songs, which candidates used in the last presidential election in their rallies. All right. And some of us are very much aware that, you know, I Can't Get No Satisfaction was a very huge part of the Trump rallies. And I looked at all of the Republican rally songs, and they were generally, it's not working now, but it could work in the future. It was fascinating. And they were all very dance very steadily too. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
The songs that were chosen for the rallies for the Democratic nominee were such that she was out there going, They were upbeat, they were saying, "Isn't the world wonderful?" So the music itself contributed to the entrainment of the people involved. And if one didn't relate to everything's fine and it's getting better, then people didn't want to be in that space. Isn't that interesting? But if it was, I get your pain, and we're going to get over it, people felt like they were where they belonged. Yeah. So how can we address that issue? I've been driving a lot lately, for those of you who don't know this. And when I drive, one of the things I do if I start to get a little bit drowsy is I turn on talk radio for listening to people I wouldn't normally choose to listen to. Very effective technique. I highly recommend it.
And how angry did you get?
It does get the blood pumping. How dare he say, where did he get that? I can't believe they're saying that. Yeah, things like that. But what I did hear, and one of the ones that I was glad to listen to, was a conversation between one of the engineers of the new mayoral candidate in New York's success in the primary. He overcame Cuomo. And I apologize, I never heard the name, but I think you all know who I'm talking about. He was in the Democratic primary, and he went around from house to house and said, what is it that you need and want? What can I provide if I become mayor? And basically the theme was, we want to be able to afford to live in our houses, we want to be able to buy food, and we want public transportation that really works. And that's basically what he ran his campaign on. And it was very interesting because in this conversation, the woman who put it together invited a centrist Democrat from some think tank in DC, and she was saying that's a socialist agenda, and that's not going to turn the red and purple states into blue. And so I'm listening to this and I'm going, that's very interesting, because that makes FDR a socialist. And what I was getting very clearly was that the issue, as I'm hearing this, because of all the driving I do and where I drive, neither one of them were going to do what they were hoping to do outside of the urban areas along the coasts. And I'll tell you why. The media in the central part of this country does not include public radio or NBC or CBS or any of the more typical stations. So there is no way to hear anything other than the message that everything's going to hell, it's the Democrats' fault, and the Christians and the Republicans are going to solve everything. And the Christians are going to be persecuted in the process. And that's the message that I swear 3/4 of the landmass of this country is getting 24/7. And people are entrained on that message. There is no room for any other message. And I'm not here to be political, I'm here to say, if we want to change a message, where do we go? Do we attempt to just use the same things we've always done in a new way? Or do we try to find new ways to be and do? Now, the other piece though is the strongest, calmest, most heart-centered rhythm is the one that takes over any human space. And there's a reason for that. It turns out, if you've followed the Heart Math Institute at all, that the heart sets the tone for the whole being. What the heart is doing as a pump, as an electrical signal projector, as a set of muscles circulating fluid everywhere, whatever it is doing sets the tone for the whole. I like to think of it as the symphony conductor. Right? So if my heart is in a calm, regular state, the whole body becomes a calm, regular body. If my heart gets twittered and starts playing around or gets speeding up, the body gets out of coherence. And so what the Heart Math Institute is working on is what they're calling coherence. And that is individuals learning how to move into that place of coherence in a way that groups can move into that place of coherence, in a way that leads to communities and nations and ultimately the globe. And they have the Global Coherence Project going on now at the HeartMath Institute website. So if you want to play in this field, that's a good place to play. Now there are studies that have been done, and both Deepak Chopra and Martha Beck like to talk about these studies, in which you can put 3 people in a room, and they can be, 2 of them can be as agitated as they like, but if one of them is calm, they all become calm. Isn't that interesting? So to the extent that we are encouraged to be agitated and to think that everything is not okay and someone can come along and fix it, we have joined the entrainment of something that maybe we don't want to see happen in this place. But to the extent that we can allow that which we are, our fundamental self that knows that right here, right now, everything I need or could ever want is totally present for this moment. And I can relax into that. And I don't have to be agitated, distressed, and concerned about something that might be someday. Make sense? Yeah. So I'm talking on 3 levels at once here. I'm talking on the level of our individual well-being. Allow that calm state of a regular rhythm in the heart, so that we can be individually coherent, so that our body systems can be healthy and well, and our minds can be steady state, open to possibilities, but not running around like a squirrel in a cage, right, in the wheel. Yeah. On the second level, being the calm presence in groups of people. Being the one who knows we're fine. Right now, everything is fine. Being open to possibilities that emerge in the moment, because every moment has lots of potential, infinite potential for becoming more of what we're being. Ooh. If I'm being agitated, then what am I doing in this moment? All right. This moment has infinite potential for becoming more of what I am being. And everyone around me is going to align on the one being that is calm and cool and fully present in the moment. Can I be that one? That's my assignment. So what begins to happen once we do the individual level, we start seeing the people around us begin to align on that coherent state of knowing in this moment all is well. Now, in our culture, we don't like to teach people that. We think we want to keep people agitated and keep people in fear and keep people upset, because that way people out there can tell us what to do. When we're in that calm, centered state, we're telling us what to do. I have over the years explored this particular notion that in any given moment, everything that I could ever want or need for this moment is fully present. And I happen to have been associated with a number of people who've been on active duty in a variety of wars. And you know, even in the trenches being fired upon, when they look back, they see that everything that they needed to be safe and well and whole in that that moment was fully present. Even people who were, kicked out of their homes for any whatever reason, when they're usually fire, same thing, in any given moment. When they started thinking about the stuff that could have been, then they got agitated. But when they were in the moment, each moment, they had everything they needed. And in my own life, there have been times I was a single mom, 2 kids, didn't know where the next $50 was coming from. But in every moment, we had exactly what we needed for that moment. It was amazing. If I started thinking about the future, I was in trouble. But if I paid attention to now, and the fact that I knew how to take whatever resources I had to do what we needed to do in that moment, and the resources were always there for that moment. It was amazing. That's when I began to learn to trust. Oh, that. Oh my goodness. I began to learn to understand that I could trust that in every moment I'll have exactly what I need for that moment. How could it be otherwise? It's always been. It's been for everyone I've ever known in every circumstance I can encounter. All right, I'm trusting. It's amazing what happens to our heartbeat when we go into trust. And then all the systems line up on that. I can trust. I can relax into this moment because this moment is fully supplied. One of the things that people like to talk about when they talk about entrainment is the possibility that in a production environment, an organization, a business, we can get people in alignment in a way that they are far more productive. And there are beginning to be a variety of papers and seminars introducing entrainment in the organization. And it's really kind of interesting because I've sort of watched organizational theory develop over my whole life, from a teenager basically. So it's been a lot of shifts and changes. And what they're trying to get across is that whatever we are being as a group, as an organization, is a function of 3 things. And one is what's going on out there, because we're in response and we need to be in alignment with what's going on around us. We have to be able to acquire supplies and make things happen out in the world around us. But another piece that's happened is people are realizing that if you've got people going all different directions with all different levels of emotional intensity, they're not being very productive. So the second level of entrainment is how can we align ourselves on a similar mission, vision, and set of goals? And then a whole new level has been introduced in recent years. And it's kind of cool because some of you know a couple years ago I had a book published in England, and it was all about how we can build authentic community in every scale of organization, huge companies, the military, as well as our community here, right? And this book came out in 23, May of 23, and lo and behold, in 24, there are these studies coming out about spiritual leadership. That basically are saying the same thing, right? And it comes down to, I am being a spiritual leader when I am so in the mission and goals and vision that I embody that and I'm fully comfortable in that and calm and at ease and know this is unfolding. That's what they're calling spiritual leadership. Now, needless to say, I think it's a little more than that. But that idea that it's possible from the inside to be the space in which people can be more fully who and what they are in that place to be is a very important one. And as we go forward in a world that many of us are horrified when we hear what we are being told, we need to know that who and what we stand for is what is. And people want to align themselves on that. One of the things that I often talk about here is our 7 principles. And I've periodically suggested that the UU 7 principles are the basis for a culture that is emerging around the world. They don't know it, but it happens that if you look at this one, you know, acceptance of one another and encouragement, yes? Honoring the diversity, seeking and working with and promoting a democratic process. I mean, it just goes on and on. They're wonderful, wonderful values and principles. And as we align and are being those principles, guess what happens around us? Whether it's here or out there. And that's, I think, a very important awareness to have. And part of why it happens is something else that I often speak of called morphogenetic fields. Some of you have heard me say this often. There is, you know, a growing body of evidence that demonstrates that the field of being that each of us is overlapping with other fields, and we resonate together, like tuning forks that are entrained. So as one of us is this coherent being, these principles, being of this, radiating, you know, we can't not vibrate. We are vibrating beings, okay? So we're being this, and all those out there that have even the slightest inclination in the direction of any of these principles start vibrating with us. And we may never meet them, and we may never see them, and we may never even be aware they exist, but they do, and they are. And now their thinking and their actions and their being becomes the center for the folks around them who become entrained on their coherent embodiment of this fundamental set of principles and this trust and knowing that in this moment, in this situation, we have everything we need. One of the ways that we can help facilitate that in the people around us is to pay attention to our conversations. Have you ever noticed, some of you are familiar with neuro-linguistic programming, which is built on this, that when you're sitting and chatting with someone, you start getting in very similar positions, you start using very similar phrases, you start aligning, basically entraining. It's called conversational entrainment. And what's going on is that in order for me to understand what you're saying, I have to have the experience in here. Well, once I've had the experience in here, then I'm aligned more closely with who and what you are, right? And as I bring your experience into my experience and we merge, we begin this process of conversational entrainment. Now, I'm really guilty of this one. If you start speaking me with an accent, I'll pick up on your accent. But it's the same thing. It's that tendency to connect at that level that is who and what all beings really are. That fundamental exchange of overlapping fields. And what's really cool is that when a therapist or a friend understands this and can be with us in this way, then we and they can create something entirely new. There's a whole new movement around rehabilitation for all kinds of things, that is based on this concept of entrainment. And it is the essence of something called science of mind. That which I know to be, that I can experience myself as being, becomes true for both of us. Because that solid, calm, consistent alignment with how things really work in the universe will always be that which people entrain on, given the opportunity. And that gets me to what's going on in the world and how can this polarization be reduced. We need to be that calm, knowing presence, trusting that humanity is part of a universal process that is always unfolding for more and more possibility, not less and less. That is always encouraging each individual to become the fullest being we can be. I first heard that in a book I did not like the title of, but I ended up having to be an author of. And it was The Science of Getting Rich. Huh? Written by a guy named Wallace Wattles in 1910. And Wallace Wattles was, interestingly, a New Thought practitioner. And he was teaching people how a certain way of thinking always brings certain results. Always. They are certain. And in his explanation of this, he wants people to understand a fundamental truth of the universe. And that is, in his words, the universe is designed in such a way that every being in it is totally supported in the fullest development for the development of the whole. Every being is encouraged, I'm taking my language now, every being is encouraged and totally supplied to become the most full expression of who we truly are. Whether it's an oak tree, a human being, an earthworm, doesn't matter, a salmon, a whale. The whole beingness of the universe is structured in such a way that every individual within it gets to be who we truly and fully are, simply because we're alive. Not because we did everything right. Not because we did what people told us to. Not because someone said, if you follow this path, you will have success. Simply by being, we have the total support of all that is to become and be our highest, most capable, most high-functioning self. Can you imagine that? Really, imagine being on this planet in a way that every part of you is functioning at its highest level. You've heard the whole, we only use 10% of our brain. Not accurate. But that bit that we don't use all our capacity is accurate. What would happen if we didn't feel as if the universe, if we weren't entrained in a culture that says, you can't do that. Who do you think you are? How many of us have heard that growing up? Oh my goodness. What if we were allowing ourselves to be entrained in the morphogenetic field of be everything you ever dreamed of? Because that's who you are. Yes? And what's really cool about it, it doesn't matter what the chronology says about the body. Age has nothing to do with it. We've been raised in a culture that says you get old. In other cultures, they don't. They don't even know what year they were born. I love the line in Crocodile Dundee. When were you born? The elders say the autumn. Right? Yeah. We don't need to track age. We don't need to believe what anyone has ever told us. But we have been entrained on an idea. We're not stuck with it. I understand that a couple of you didn't know that the word entrainment was real. And I understand that. Because it's not something that we talk about in our way of being. We talk about rugged individualism. And then we follow the sheep. Entrainment is a herd of sheep. Entrainment is a bunch of lemmings. Entrainment is believing that I have to because everyone else is. Or not even realizing that I am because everyone else is. Yeah. Can you consider the possibility of the poem If you can keep your head when all around you are losing theirs? Can you consider the possibility that this moment in history is calling every being in this world, and particularly in rooms like this one, to step up to an awareness of what is real in how this universe functions, and leave behind the messages that have tried to limit us. And in the process, establish the new coherence, the new level of coherence for all beings, in which many of the things we are being told about are absolutely impossible, cannot happen, and will not happen anymore. And actually can be dissolved now. Someone asked me about a book I used to actually promote a lot. It was called Ecotopia by a man named Ernest Callenbach. And he wrote a second volume. The book was Ecotopia Emerging, because everyone's saying, how did they get there? Right? So in Ecotopia, I'm going to take 5 more minutes. You okay with this? All right. 4 more minutes. Yes, ma'am. So in Ecotopia, Ernest Callenbach, a sociology professor at Berkeley during the 1960s, has outlined the possibility that a bunch of people who are in touch with human well-being and Earth well-being actually break away from the United States of America because the US is not supporting that. He wrote this in the 60s. In 1970, he took it to the publishers of the Whole Earth Catalog, and they said, oh, that's old hat. And what? So he got another publisher, and it was published. And in 1972, the book came out, and it became a bestseller, and most of you have never heard of it. And what he was designing or describing was the strip of land that we are very much a part of, that runs from about Santa Barbara to Anchorage, this side of the Coast Range. This side of the Sierras for sure, definitely the Coast Range. So the Sierras, the Cascades, everything west. And these are people who choose to live life in a way that is honoring each other and honoring the planet, and ecology and utopia are what he has put together. Utopia means good place, by the way. And in Ecotopia Emerging, in the second volume, because people are saying, however could such a thing happen, he outlined the processes by which people made the choice to function in harmony with each other and the planet. And in some cases, they had to undo things that they did not find to be in harmony. Oh, little things like nuclear power plants, weapons places, those kind of little things. And one of the suggestions that he lays out in this book, and the only reason I'm bringing it up is because it was put in my attention right before I came in. One of the suggestions that he has is that people who are given a terminal diagnosis get together and show up at those places and undo them, knowing that they're not going to survive anyway. So they do whatever they need to do to undo those, whether it's capping the whatever, whether it's standing up against the police, whatever it is that is necessary to undo the presence of this disaster called a business. Okay? And I read this in my 20s and 30s, and I'm looking at this and I'm going, wow. And now in today's world, I'm going, how many of us are aware that our being in harmony with the planet sometimes requires that we act in ways that don't look exactly sociable? And yet, how many of us recognize that every action we must take for our fulfillment must be in a positive direction? Can I merge those two ideas? If I can, then the things that have been perpetuated since 1972 without a stop, without barely a slowdown, may possibly be undone. In Spain, it is now illegal to advertise any product or process that uses petroleum products. Very positive move in the direction of how can we restore balance. Right? Maybe it's as simple as that. Or maybe it is 100 or 200 people who have been told they're not going to live more than a few months anyway, going somewhere and saying, stop. We will sit here until you stop. I don't know. I'm not going to be one of those people because that's not my job. Unless one day I wake up and I go, yes, it's time. I'm going to go there and say, stop. So far, I've been able to do it in a positive way, and I'm almost done. When we were living in Florida, we were crossing a bay called the Escambia Bay, and the Escambia River flows into this bay, and about every 2 or 3 weeks there would be a huge fish kill. I mean, literally the whole bay would be covered with fish. And it was awful. It was terrible. And I did a little research, and I found out that up the Escambia River were 2 chemical plants. One of them, both of them, were dumping into the river that which the other company was buying from South America. We turned that around. They started buying from each other. We no longer had fish kills in the Escambia Bay. There are positive ways to turn this stuff around. I'm not saying chemical plants should exist, but I am saying we can move in the direction of experiencing a life in harmony with each other and with the planet as part of this interconnected web of life that entrains on the one that is coherent and calm and whole and at peace and trusting that the vision is unfolding in us, through us, and as us. For so it is. Thank you.